The morning air was cold, sharp, and empty, the kind of air that reminded you just how forgotten you were in a world that had no time for the poor. The sun hadn't yet broken through the clouds, and the sky looked like wet cement smeared with sorrow. Somewhere between the crack of dawn and the city's first yawn, Lena, a 16-year-old girl with bare feet and a heart full of fading hope, stepped out into the world again. Her clothes clung to her tiny frame like tired shadows, torn, faded, and years old. A long shirt she had sewn herself with pieces of discarded fabric flapped against her thin legs. Her skin was weathered, not from age but from hard days under burning suns and cold nights without blankets. She had lived all her life in a neighborhood that didn't appear on any tourist map, a place the rich pretended didn't exist. But even in the most forgotten corner of the city, Lena still carried something powerful inside her, kindness, wrapped in quiet resilience. She pushed her small, creaky metal cart as a gift from the junkyard man last winter through the muddy alleyways and trash-littered streets. Every morning, Lena collected bottles, cans, old wires, and anything she could sell. It wasn't much, but it bought medicine for her mother, who lay sick in a leaking wooden shack with a fever that never seemed to leave. Her mother used to be a beautiful singer once in a small church choir. Her voice could calm crying babies and make angry drunks weep in silence, but sickness, like poverty, came uninvited and stayed like a curse. Every night before falling asleep, Lena would press her lips to her mother's warm forehead and whisper, "One day, Mama, one day I'll get us out of this." And every morning, she tried again. That day, though, something strange waited for her. It was behind the big hotel, the one with marble floors and golden lights that sparkled like stars when the world went dark. Lena often searched their dumpsters. The rich threw away things the poor would cry to own. Yesterday, she found a broken watch and 2 dented cans of soup. But today, something else lay among the piles of waste. A man. At first, she thought it was just another drunk or a homeless wanderer passed out from the cold, but something felt off. He wasn't dressed like the people who lived on the street. His jacket, though ripped and filthy, was once expensive, its stitching, the kind rich men wore to meetings. His shoes, now missing, had clearly been high-end, and the ring on his dirt-streaked finger still sparkled faintly in the early morning light. Lena froze, her hand gripped the card tightly. The man was curled into himself, trembling slightly, a nearly empty wine bottle still clenched in his hand like it was a lifeline. His face was a mess, bruised, swollen, and speckled with dry blood. A once clean white shirt was now stained with dirt and shame. He didn't look like he belonged here. But then again, whoever really belongs in the trash? "Sir," Lena said softly, her voice barely a whisper, afraid to waken nightmare. No response. She moved closer, heart pounding. What if he attacked her? What if he was dangerous? But then, what if he was dying? Her mom's words echoed in her heart. Even the worst man was once someone's baby. Even the cruelest heart had once felt love. She knelt slowly, gently brushing away a crushed soda can near his arm. "Sir." "Hey." This time, a groan, faint, broken, but real. He was alive. Lena looked around. The alley was empty. A cat scratched through a pizza box, but otherwise, no one. Cars sped by on a distant highway. No one stopped for the poor. No one noticed the forgotten. No one ever would. She pulled her scarf from around her neck and folded it. Then, nervously but gently, she placed it under the man's head. He was burning hot. Fever, maybe, or alcohol poisoning? Lena didn't know. She barely understood the medicine she gave her mother, but she knew this. If she left him here, he might not make it to noon. She should walk away. She should protect herself. But she couldn't. There was something haunting about the man's face. Beneath the grime, beneath the injuries and the stink of wine, there was a story, a pain deeper than the gutter. His chest rose and fell in jagged breaths. His fingers twitched like he was grasping at something invisible. Maybe memories, maybe regrets. Lena sat beside him, unsure what to do next. Should she get help, call someone? But she had no phone. No adult would believe her anyway. To them, she was just a dirty junk collector. And yet, she stayed. She waited. She tore a piece of cloth from her skirt and dipped it into a bottle of water she carried. She wiped his forehead gently, over and over, like she used to do for her little brother before he died of the same fever that now kept her mother bedridden. The man stirred again. This time, his lips parted, he muttered something, but it made no sense. She left. The letter, gold, gone. Gold? Was he dreaming, talking nonsense? Lena leaned in. What did you say? But his eyes rolled back, and he was silent again. She sat back, hands trembling. This wasn't normal. This man wasn't just a drunk. Something had happened to him, something big, something no one knew. Maybe he had run away from somewhere, maybe he had been thrown out, maybe. Who was he? A loop had opened. A girl with nothing, a man who once had everything. And a secret, buried in a dumpster behind a hotel. What happens when the richest man meets the poorest girl not in a ballroom, but in the trash? What if saving a stranger was the key to unlocking everything she ever dreamed of? Or feared? She didn't know. But as she sat beside him, shielding his body from the wind with her own thin frame, one thing was certain. Fate had chosen her. And something was about to change. Forever. The man groaned again as Lena adjusted the scarf under his head. The fever hadn't broken, his breathing was still heavy and uneven, and his fingers clenched and opened slowly like they were trying to grip something from a memory. Lena sat beside him for nearly an hour, unsure of what to do. She didn't have a phone, she didn't have money, she barely had enough food to last her mother the day. Every second that ticked by was a choice, stay with this stranger or walk away and keep surviving. But there was something in the man's face. Something so broken it felt familiar, like he had lost something too, maybe not in the same way she had, but still loss was loss. And Lena knew what it meant to lose everything. With trembling hands, she reached for her cart, pulled out an old wool blanket she used on the coldest nights, and laid it over him. It was thin and torn, but better than the wind. The decision was made, she couldn't leave him. Suddenly, he stirred again, his mouth moved. And this time his voice was barely loud enough to hear. She lied to me. Took everything. Lena leaned in closer. She said she loved me. But the company. My accounts. It's all gone. She blinked. Company? Accounts? Who was this man? Before she could ask more, his eyes opened just for a second, bloodshot, distant, lost. He looked right at her, confused, frightened. Am I dead? He asked weakly. No, Lena whispered, you're still here. Tears welled up in his eyes, and his head fell back onto the scarf. He passed out again, but now Lena had heard enough to know something terrible had happened to him. This wasn't just a man who drank too much and ended up in the trash. This was someone who had once had everything, money, power, love, and lost it all. Maybe even worse. Maybe someone had taken it from him. She waited a little longer, then slowly pushed her cart to the side. Carefully, with all the strength in her small arms, she helped him sit up and leaned his body over the edge of the cart. It was risky. If someone saw her, they might think she was stealing or hurting him. But Lena didn't care. She had carried heavier burdens. She'd once dragged her mother through the flooded streets during monsoon season to get her to a clinic. This was nothing. Step by step, alley by alley, she dragged the cart and the unconscious man toward home. It took nearly an hour. The wheels squeaked, her arms ached, her back burned, but she didn't stop. When she finally reached the tiny shack she called home, her mother sat propped against a wall, coughing softly. Mama, Lena said breathlessly, I brought someone, he needs help. Her mother's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she helped her daughter pull the man inside, laying him on the tattered mattress that usually belonged to Lena. They covered him, placed wet cloths on his head, and tried to get a few sips of water down his throat. Days passed. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he spoke nonsense, sometimes he cried, sometimes he screamed. Once, he almost hit Lena in a fever dream, but she didn't flinch. She just whispered, "It's okay, you're safe now." Then, on the fourth day, he opened his eyes fully clear, focused, alert. He looked around the shack, at the tiny window, the makeshift kitchen, and finally at Lena, who sat by his side with a bowl of porridge she had borrowed from a neighbor. "Where am I?" he asked, voice hoarse. "In my home," Lena said softly. "I found you behind the hotel. You were sick, you're better now." He tried to sit up, groaning in pain. "How long?" "4 days." He looked stunned, his eyes darted toward the door, as if checking if this was real. "You helped me?" "Yes. Why?" Lena shrugged. "You needed help." He laughed bitterly. "That's rare, especially from someone who clearly needs more help than I do." Lena looked away. "Maybe, but Mama says kindness is the only thing poor people can give freely." There was silence. Then he said, "What's your name?" "Lena." "I'm Ethan." She didn't recognize the name. She hadn't heard of any Ethans from the news or the city papers, but he clearly wasn't just a normal man. "Ethan what?" He hesitated. "Ethan Cole." The name hit her like a whisper in the wind. It sounded familiar. Her mother's coughing stopped. She looked up sharply. "Ethan Cole?" her mother repeated. "Why died, Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Technologies?" Ethan's face darkened. "Used to be." Lena blinked. She had heard the name. Everyone had. He was the billionaire who had built an empire out of software, apps, and investments. His name had been in the headlines, the magazines, even the TV once, always smiling, always holding awards or shaking hands with presidents. But now, he was lying on a thin mattress in the poorest part of the city, saved by a girl who owned nothing. "What happened to you?" Lena finally asked. He exhaled deeply, as if pushing years of pain out of his chest. "I trusted someone, loved her, I thought she cared about me. Turns out, she was after my money, my company, everything. She forged documents, worked with my assistant to frame me. The board kicked me out, my accounts were frozen, I lost my home, I lost everything." He looked at Lena. "I don't even know why I'm alive." The words hung in the air like a ghost. Lena felt her throat tighten. She reached out, offering him the bowl of porridge again. "Maybe you're alive," she said gently, "because someone up there thinks you still have something good left to do." Ethan stared at her thin arms, her sunburned cheeks, her eyes that held pain but no judgment, and for the first time in days, he took the spoon and ate. That night, as Lena lay on the floor beside her mother, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Ethan had said, about betrayal, about how quickly life could change. But mostly, she thought about what came next. Because helping Ethan had opened something, not just a secret, not just a past, but a new beginning, a twist in the story. The kind of moment that makes a person wonder, was it chance, or destiny, that brought them together? Somewhere, deep inside her, Lena knew. This wasn't just about saving a man from the trash. This was the start of something far bigger, something that could change both of their lives forever. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He lay awake on the worn mattress, staring at the ceiling of the small shack. The wooden planks had gaps where moonlight leaked through, and he could hear rats scurrying along the rooftops. The sound of coughing came from the corner of Lena's mother, still fighting her illness. The room was small, cramped, and cold. But it was the safest he had felt in weeks. He had no idea how he had ended up behind that hotel. He remembered drinking, wandering, maybe crying, but everything after that was a blur. What he knew for sure now was this: someone he'd never met, someone who had nothing, had saved him when no one else would. Lena. He turned his head slightly and saw her lying on the floor, curled up beside her mother. She had given up her bed for him, wrapped in only a thin sheet. She shivered slightly but didn't complain. The kindness of that gesture stung him more deeply than any betrayal he had faced. Because this girl, this stranger, had given him more in 4 days than anyone from his wealthy, polished world ever had. Ethan finally drifted into a deep, healing sleep. By morning, Lena had already left. She had told her mother she was going to collect recyclables before the garbage trucks arrived, but before she left, she quietly placed a half piece of bread and a cup of warm water near Ethan. It wasn't much, but it was all she could offer. When Ethan woke up, he sat up slowly. His body still ached, but his mind was clearer now. He noticed the food and something else, a piece of folded paper. On it, written in the neat handwriting of someone who had clearly practiced with scraps, were 3 words: "You're not alone." He stared at the note for a long time. Then, carefully, he rose to his feet. The next few hours were quiet. Ethan helped Lena's mother clean up the little space they had. He boiled water, wiped the floor, and even repaired a broken leg of the stool using a strip of metal he found beside the house. For the first time in a long time, he felt useful, not as a CEO, not as a businessman, just as a man helping another human being. When Lena returned, her cart heavier than usual, she looked surprised to see him standing. "You're up," she said, smiling. "Thanks to you," he replied. She motioned to the stool he had fixed. "You did that? I figured I owe you more than just my life." They shared a small laugh. It was the first one Ethan had truly meant in months. Later that evening, the 3 of them sat outside the shack, sharing a bowl of rice and lentils that a neighbor had kindly brought over. They talked about little things. Lena told stories of her childhood, how her father had died working at a factory that never paid its workers. Ethan listened carefully, humbled by how many struggles Lena had endured, and how she still smiled. Eventually, the conversation shifted. "Ethan," Lena asked gently, "what are you going to do now?" He looked at the stars, his eyes darkened. "I don't know. I have nothing, no home, no job. Everyone turned their backs on me when I lost my company. I don't even have clothes to wear if I walk into a building, and the woman I loved." He paused, jaw tightening. "She destroyed me." Lena was quiet, then she said something that surprised him. "Then maybe this is your chance to start over." He looked at her, confused. "Start over, like this?" She nodded. "When you have nothing, you also have nothing holding you down. You can rebuild from truth, not money." Her words hit him like a wave. In all his years of boardrooms, contracts, and wealth, no one had ever spoken to him that way. That night, as he lay awake again, Ethan thought about something Lena had said: kindness is the only thing the poor can give freely. But maybe it was also the most valuable thing in the world. Over the next few days, Ethan stayed. He insisted on helping. He fixed the leaky corner of the shack's roof. He repaired the old fan that hadn't worked in years. He even helped Lena organize her scrap collection so she could earn more from it. People in the neighborhood began to notice. Some were suspicious, others were kind. One day, Lena returned from her collection route to find Ethan teaching a group of local boys how to use an old laptop, a device someone had thrown away that he had managed to repair. "They've never touched a computer before," he explained. "I figured they should learn." That was the moment Lena knew something had shifted in him. He wasn't just a man trying to survive anymore. He was becoming someone new. One afternoon, Ethan sat with Lena on a hill behind the neighborhood. The city skyline glittered far away, reminding him of the world he once ruled. "You know," he began, "I spent years thinking money made me powerful, that status meant I was safe, but the moment I lost it, no one cared. Not even the people who said they loved me." Lena looked at him. "And now?" He smiled gently. "Now, I think I'm starting to understand what power really is. It's not in your wallet, it's in your choices, in what you do when no one's watching. Like you, Lena, you had nothing. And you saved me." She looked down, embarrassed. "You don't even realize how rare that is," he added. "In your world, kindness isn't just an act. It's a way of surviving." There was silence. Then Lena said something that made Ethan's chest tighten. "I think we're both survivors, you from your world, me from mine." Ethan nodded. For the first time, they weren't just a poor girl and a fallen millionaire, they were equals, 2 wounded hearts trying to find meaning again. But just as their bond deepened, something unexpected happened. One morning, while walking through the alleyways, Ethan spotted a man reading a newspaper. The headline froze his blood. "Missing tycoon presumed dead, Ethan Cole's fortune transferred to fiancé." Below it was a picture of Vanessa, his former lover holding a press conference, pretending to mourn while smiling behind fake tears. "Unbelievable," Ethan whispered. "She's taken everything." But that wasn't the worst part. In smaller text, the article said authorities were closing the case and dividing his estate. His death was no longer being investigated. Everyone believed he was gone for good. His hands trembled, not from anger, from realization. He had two choices: stay here, forgotten, or return, and fight for what was right. He rushed back to the shack, newspaper in hand. Lena and her mother read it in stunned silence. "You're going back, aren't you?" Lena asked quietly. Ethan looked at her, heart pounding. "Yes, I have to." Lena nodded slowly. "Then do one thing." "What?" "Don't go back for revenge," she said. "Go back to the truth, and to prove that kindness still matters in that world." Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't say anything, but his heart answered for him. That night, he packed what little he had borrowed, the newspaper, and Lena's handwritten note, "You're not alone." And just before dawn, with tears in his eyes, he looked at the girl who had found him in the trash, and helped him remember he was still human. "I'll come back," he whispered, "I promise." Ethan stepped into the city like a man walking through the ruins of a former life. The buildings were the same, the signs still bore his name, the people still moved fast with coffee cups, phones, and power suits, but to him, everything looked different. He wasn't a part of this world anymore, not as he had been. His beard was longer, his clothes were plain, and his once confident stride was now cautious, but beneath it all, something inside him had hardened. No longer driven by pride or money, Ethan Cole had come back for one reason only: to reclaim his name with truth. He had nothing to his name, no lawyer, no support, not even identification. Vanessa had seen to that, but he had one thing stronger than all of that: the truth and a witness who had nothing to gain by lying. The first thing he did was find an old friend, someone who hadn't betrayed him. That man was Mason Clark, an ex-board member who had once been Ethan's college roommate. Mason had left the company a year before the betrayal, moving on to start his own business. When Ethan showed up at Mason's doorstep, the man barely recognized him. "Ethan?" Mason asked, blinking in disbelief. "It's me," Ethan whispered. "I need your help." Mason pulled him inside immediately, shocked at the state Ethan was in. Over cups of coffee, Ethan told him everything from the betrayal to the alley, from Lena to the newspaper. When he was done, Mason leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. "I always suspected Vanessa, but I didn't know she would go this far. She forged my signature, hacked my accounts, and convinced the board I was mentally unfit," Ethan said bitterly. "Then she declared me dead when no one heard from me." Mason nodded. "Then it's time we bring her lies into the light." Over the next several days, Mason arranged a small legal team of people he trusted. They gathered whatever evidence Ethan still remembered: digital footprints, past communications, financial records, even surveillance footage from the hotel where he'd been last seen. Mason used his resources to dig into Vanessa's sudden rise, and slowly, the cracks began to show. But the real breakthrough came when one of Vanessa's former assistants, a woman named Talia, agreed to speak. "She promised me a promotion," Talia confessed, "said if I helped her access your files and sign a few documents, she'd take care of me. I didn't know she was planning to erase you." Her testimony was the spark they needed. Ethan's legal team filed a motion to freeze the estate transfer and demanded a court hearing. At first, the news media dismissed it as a scam. But when Ethan walked into that courtroom, the cameras snapped non-stop. The man declared dead was back, and with a story no one could ignore. Vanessa sat confidently in her polished suit at the defendant's table, still flashing that same empty smile, but the moment she saw Ethan walk into the room, alive and determined, her smile cracked. He looked her in the eyes, not with hate, but with strength. The trial was brutal, every lie was exposed, every forged document was brought forward. Talia's testimony crushed Vanessa's claims, and Ethan stood tall through it all. But what surprised the public most was the closing argument. Ethan didn't talk about money, he didn't demand revenge. He simply said, "I was broken, not just by betrayal, but by the realization that I had built a life on shallow roots, but when I had nothing, someone who had even less gave me everything, a girl with no roof, no money, no reason to help me chose to show compassion, and that taught me more than years in any boardroom ever did. I am not here to destroy anyone, I am here to reclaim my name. And to show that integrity still matters." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge ruled in Ethan's favor. Vanessa was arrested for fraud. Ethan's assets and company were reinstated. But Ethan didn't return to his old office, not right away. Instead, he walked back into the slums where his second life had begun. When Lena saw him at her doorstep, dressed now in a clean shirt but with the same warm eyes, she couldn't speak, she just stared at him in shock. He smiled and stepped closer. "I told you I'd come back." Lena finally found her voice. "You look different." "I am." He stepped inside, greeting her mother with a respectful nod, and handed over a small envelope. "What's this?" Lena asked. "An official offer. I want to fund your education, any school, any city, full ride, and I want to move your mother into a better home where she can get proper care." Lena gasped. "Ethan, you don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently, "because I wouldn't be standing today if you hadn't stopped that day and helped a man in the trash." Lena's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, tears filled her eyes. For the first time, her dreams didn't feel like impossible stories. Then Ethan added, "And I want you to work with me." She looked up, confused. "You taught me that my world forgot humanity, kindness. I'm rebuilding the company, not just to make money, but to make a difference. I want you by my side to keep me grounded." "But I don't have a degree." "I don't care, you have something better, a heart." The next few months were magical. Ethan transformed his company into a social enterprise. He invested in shelters, food programs, and educational tools for kids in poverty. He launched a second chance program that gave jobs to people with difficult pasts, and Lena was at every meeting, every boardroom, quietly observing and learning. She had gone from pushing a cart through alleys to helping build policies that could change lives. News outlets called Ethan's return a miracle, but those who knew the real story called it something else. A redemption. But despite all the success, Ethan often found himself walking back to that alley behind the hotel, not to relieve pain but to remember. He would stand there, stare at the spot where his life had almost ended, and whisper a quiet thank you to the universe. Because sometimes, the richest lessons come from the poorest corners. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with orange, Lena and Ethan stood on the same hill they had once shared, the place where dreams had once felt out of reach. Lena looked at him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that day?" Ethan smiled. "I think I would have died, maybe not in body, but definitely in spirit." She nodded slowly. "You found yourself again." "No," he said softly, "you found me." They sat in silence as the city lights flickered in the distance. For a long time, there were no words, just the gentle wind between two souls that had been torn apart and stitched together by fate. And then, just as the stars began to appear, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper Lena had once given him. "You're not alone," he read aloud. "Those 3 words saved me." He turned to her. "Let me say them back to you now. For life." Lena's eyes filled with tears. And under the open sky, 2 broken hearts, one from wealth, one from hardship, realized they had become whole again. The day Ethan and Lena stood together in front of the new community center, a small crowd had gathered. There were kids laughing, women with their babies, and men who had once been jobless now wearing uniforms, working as staff or caretakers. Painted on the front wall in bold letters were the words, "The House of Second Chances, inspired by Lena." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. She had never dreamed of this. She had once searched through garbage bins to find food and recyclable bottles. Now, her name stood tall on a building that gave hundreds of people hope. "You did this," Ethan whispered beside her. She shook her head, humbled. No. We did. He smiled, but in his heart, he knew she was the reason this story had ever begun. After the trial and Ethan's public redemption, he didn't just go back to being the CEO of a global company, he walked away from parts of his old life that had caused destruction, the fancy mansion, the cocktail parties, the fake friendships all gone. Instead, he started building something better. He converted one of his office buildings into an academy for underprivileged youth. He used a part of his wealth to set up micro-businesses run by women from low-income backgrounds. He funded free clinics in 3 major cities. But the soul of it all, the very heart, was the house of second chances. And Lena, she wasn't just the girl from the trash heap anymore. She became a leader. She started small, helping families get settled, connecting people to job training, distributing clothes and food, but soon, she was speaking at events. Her words were raw, honest, and full of power because she didn't speak from theory, she spoke from experience. When I was 10, she once shared during a fundraiser, I used to beg outside hotels. I remember watching people throw away food while my stomach growled. One day, I found a broken toy in the trash and imagined it was new. That's how I survived, pretending, hoping. But now, I don't have to pretend anymore. And no child should. The room had fallen silent, then tears, then standing applause. Lena had become a voice for the voiceless. Meanwhile, Ethan began writing a book, not about his fall but about what Lena taught him. He titled it, Found in the Trash, A Billionaire's Story of True Wealth. The book became a bestseller, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. People from all over the world sent letters, emails, and videos, some crying, others thanking him for reminding them that no matter how far someone falls, there's always a way back. And in every interview, Ethan would repeat one phrase. I thought I was the one saving her, but the truth is, she saved me. Months passed, seasons changed, and something else changed too, something soft, silent, and slow. Lena and Ethan grew closer. Not just in purpose, but in heart. They shared laughter during community picnics, they walked through the old slums together, not out of pity, but out of love for the people. Sometimes they sat for hours just listening to music or watching the stars. And one evening, as the city twinkled in the distance, Ethan turned to her. Lena, he said, voice shaky, I know I came from a world that hurt you, I know I was broken when you found me, but I've built my second life on the strength you gave me, and now... He paused. She looked at him, eyes wide, heart pounding. I want to build a future with you, not just for the world, but for us, for you and me. She didn't speak for a moment, then, through tears, she whispered, yes, 1,000 times yes. Their wedding wasn't grand, it wasn't in a luxury hall or on a mountain in Italy. It was in the courtyard of the House of Second Chances. Surrounded by children whose lives they had changed, mothers who now had homes, and fathers who had been given dignity again. Instead of expensive decorations, the walls were covered in hand-drawn cards made by kids from the center. Instead of a diamond tiara, Lena wore a headpiece made of fresh white daisies, Ethan wore a simple gray suit, and he cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. The world watched through live streams, people tuned in from different countries. Headlines read, From the streets to the heart, the love story that changed thousands of lives. But for Ethan and Lena, it wasn't about the cameras or the attention. It was about one truth. 2 broken people had found each other, and built something beautiful. Years later, the House of Second Chances had grown, it became a national movement, similar centers opened in other cities, all inspired by Ethan and Lena's journey. Their story was taught in schools, used in leadership seminars, and told around campfires, not as a fairy tale, but as a real-life reminder that compassion could transform even the darkest moments into the brightest lights. Lena would sometimes still visit her old alley, not to mourn but to reflect. She would sit there for a moment, then leave behind a small flower, a prayer, and a smile. One day, a young girl sat beside her on the curb. She looked tired, holding a torn plastic bag. Lena gently placed her hand on the girl's shoulder and said, Come with me, I want to show you a place where second chances begin. And so the story ends, where new stories begin, from trash to triumph, from betrayal to purpose, from pain to love. Ethan had lost everything but found what truly mattered. Lena had nothing but gave the world her heart. Together, they didn't just build a life. They built a legacy. If you believe in second chances, in kindness, in the power of just one small act to change everything, then please, like this video to support storytelling that inspires. Comment below your favorite moment or a line from Lena's journey. Share this story with someone who might need a little hope today. Subscribe for more emotional, life-changing stories like this one. Because every view helps spread light, and you could be the reason someone finds their second chance. Sometimes, the person the world throws away is the one who saves it.